Dear listeners, dear friends, as a physician, I was asked to give my statement to the current situation that we have in the world. I am an ENT specialist and have worked for over 16 years in my practice as an ENT. And for over 10 years, I have given public health seminar in many countries of this world. And the main subject was and is, why do we get sick? Where does disease come from? And evidently it is my duty to give also a statement to this situation of this infectious disease. Something happened in this world I never thought it would be possible. That I would say in time, in a second, in a split of a second, regarding of the history of time, a single group of people and a single institution manages to unite the whole world in the shortest possible time, without weapons, without violence, without money, and to lead a war in the midst of peace against an invisible, dangerous, deadly, unlocatable, non-killable enemy. This is my summary of what I experience in these days. How many governments surrender to the experts? Maybe a few, not yet. But it's the whole world. All political parties, no matter what spectrum they are not now fighting one to another, but they are united in this fight against this enemy. All courts and jurisdictions are put aside, and we now concentrate on that what we think really matters. And the most interesting phenomenon is all religions and ideologies are suddenly united. Now, even though ecumenism has tried to unite them all through different agreements between all religions, now you don't need them anymore, because all are united against this invisible, dangerous, unlocatable, and non-killable enemy. And the majority of people of this earth are following the information. Now, what is it about? I call this an unprecedented masterpiece. What Caesar or Napoleon couldn't do has reached a few people through an information that takes the whole world captive and concentrates the whole power to few men. What a marvelous thing. Never been existed. And it would be a good thing if it would not be about life and death. If it would not be about truth and error. So, what really is going on? What is it all about? Is it about health? I mean, do we fight a natural enemy? I mean, whenever you have a natural enemy like a cyclone or a flood or even an earthquake, you do something in those things where you are having visible things that things come upon you. So, nature cannot be conquered. And if we think we conquer now nature, we will lose. So is this a natural fight? I mean, do we fight against nature? Is it about that we fight for survival? Is it that we fight for our economy? Or even, how some people think, it's about the ruling of the world? I call it a battle. And it's an ideological battle. That is, it's the mind battle about the physical matter, the disease or infection. And being a physician and having given so many seminars about how things happen, I am very happy that when it comes about disease, you don't need any ideology. That means you don't need a theory because you have evidence. You know what is really like it is because it's physical, it's measurable, it's tangible. It's nothing that you must have, I say so, a faith-based thing. That's why I enjoy the opportunity to realize that you can have not a teaching over physics, over things that are absolute, just having an idea about it. It is self-evident. So let us look. How can I calculate an unknown in nature? We have X, infectious disease. And we have it, we see it, and we need to know something about it. But how can I calculate things without being dependent on the data of others? Now, even though if I can use data of others, I might need something by which I can discern if the data of others are correct or not. How can I do that? That's why I call this presentations, these statements, what do you believe as truth? Because actually, we will see the way we function at the entrance of our being is belief. And you either believe something as truth, which is truth, or you believe a lie. There's no more alternatives. When I started my practice, I asked myself, how can I discern things and data and all things that come unto me without being dependent to trust the one that gives me the data? Because you have no choice today. You must trust the newspapers, do you? Because look, if you would have the A and the B to calculate the X, you would need them. You would know if someone tells you the truth or not, because you would have things that are immutable. And the A is the human being. It's about us. The B, it is the virus. So, how can you calculate the relationship of both to each other? There is only one thing that gives you the right calculation, and it is the law of nature, because it happens in nature. And now, having two constant immutable parameters, that is, function and structure of the human, function and structure of the virus, which all are determined by the law of nature, you by no doubt can calculate to 100% the X, because it cannot be otherwise. But let me ask you, it's a very personal question. How many of you know these three things, the A, the B, and the law of nature? How many of you have ever learned how do you work? How do you function? How do you build? Is it not so that over many centuries science has built a thing in which you must trust blindly? Because you don't know. You never can fool a human being if he knows something. I could go to a specialist of iPads and would tell him, look, this iPad of mine, it can fly. Or it can, the letters jump out of it. And what would he say to me? He would say, I'm sorry, you got crazy. That's impossible. He does not even need to look to my iPad. He does not even need to evaluate it and see, maybe it's possible. No. He knows for sure. He won't lose a second to listen to my theory. Because he knows how things work. Deception is only possible if you don't know. Then you must believe. And there are only two kinds of informations out there in this world. We are confronted only with two types of informations. It's either that self-evident information, which requires no interpretation, because it is so. You see, you have the stove, it's an object, it's a clear structure, it's a clear function, and you know the means by which it functions. There's no discussion. There will never be made a console to say, let's see how this will work. Because it's said. There is no contradiction that one says, no, the structure is like that. No, the object is... There is no discussion in things that are self-evident. There's no contradiction. The same thing is in nature. Nature is 100% trustworthy because it is governed by laws that are immutable and unchangeable. But of course, you must know. The other type of information is that you need to interpret. Images, words, gestures, actions. You get a lot of news, and in these days, I never got so many links to whatever, never get so many questions, even though I got a lot of questions being a physician and working with the patients. But today, you are bombarded. It's an explosion. And you hear about studies, about experiments, about observations, about thesis and hypothesis, and so on. And even you have the religious people, the Bible and the religious books. These are all things that you cannot just read like they read, because they have multiple interpretations or they have multiple ways of seeing things. And if there is a multiple way, the one extracts this, the other extracts that on the word, because the word is not information, it must be extracted from there. That's why it is called interpretation. Interpretation is the extraction of the information of a thing that is not the information itself. That means that doesn't evidence itself, doesn't prove itself by itself. So it needs means for interpretation. So summarizing together, you must know, you must learn those things that are self-evident. If you don't know them, they're still there. So this is what I teach for the last 10 years. Things that must be known, that no one needs to believe me. Because he can go there to nature and he could see if the information that I give, without needing to trust me, he can prove the information because it is self-evident. He can see it. And the other information you must believe. So these are the two informations. That what you don't need to believe, but you need to know, you need to learn it, and that would have been most important to learn it in schools, to learn how we are framed, and not those things first that must be believed. Both are necessary, both are there, we both need them, But we will never have an argument about what is self-evident. We will never have, except we are totally ignorant. But you cannot argue about what is self-evident. But you always have an argument about those things that must be believed. That's why there are two kinds of faith. There are two kinds of things to extract the information from the words and images and so on. It's either language, grammar, culture, the interpretation of the scientists, experts, we have a lot of them today, the scholars, psychologists, the opinion of the members of the family, and your own estimation. Tell me how many of these enumerated ways of interpretation are objective. And I know you see it, there's none. all these are subjective means by approaching a thing. Now, you can take them into consideration, but they can never be trusted. They can give you hints, language, grammar, and culture, but never you can put your faith on them. Because you need an objective means, and that is the law of nature that is immutable. You must know what is possible or not. Can this work without power? Can this work by itself? You know it's not. So, who can fool you to say this works by itself? Or it even mutates itself? You will know it's not possible. And then, of course, you need to know the object to whom the information is given. Now, all the books and studies are made for us, not for animals. No one knows what they don't read and evaluate things the way we do. So, how can you know? Especially, let's see what studies about humanity say if you don't know the human. So the greatest ignorance is about ourselves. We don't know our construction, our structure, the way things are built, the way they function. We don't know our needs that are spiritual and physical, and they are immutable. So having this, we have the law of nature and the information that is given to the person. Now, if you know the person, how it works, then you know how to apply the information. So, in the end, you have only two ways. You are either in a blind faith, based on estimation, wishful thinking, extrapolation, and statistics. They are purely subjective, and you have no way, except you trust them, to believe them. And that's blind faith, because logic might help you, but logic is not trustworthy. It's your own subjectivity. That's why logical things can be very, very wrong, because they have no objective, undisputable foundation on what you built. That's why the other faith, I call it real faith. It is based on an unchanging laws of nature. And if there is something in this world where you can trust, it is only that, what you can prove yourself is possible. So, how can we know things? I was recently in Australia, and one evening with some youth people, they were watching a movie on YouTube about the flat earth. And I was watching together with them. And when it was over, I said, how can you find out things without needing to trust the data and the experiments of others? I find it a fantastic way to search things by yourself and looking to that which is a law and always unchangeable. I was always a doubter from nature. I was born like this. I never believed. I don't say never believed blindly, but I had, because no one taught me. But when I started in my practice, I said I must have 100% truth. And that is only something my mind cannot interpret. My mind must surrender to it and must say it is only this way and it cannot never be another way. That's why the news about an infectious disease didn't disturb me so much, But what disturbed me, I must tell you, was the reaction of mankind. It is such an amazing thing how you can react on something. You don't know how it happens. In a panic. And that scared me in the first moment. But the fear of an infection, I don't have, because there is a law in this universe, and we can see it on the earth, that governs every interaction of any particle that exists. And that law says nothing can exist and function from itself. It is dependent on energy and raw material, or we can say fuel. So you must take at least two elements. The cause, as you have an entrance and input. But all those things that you take are not for you, because nothing was made for itself or himself. Neither humanity was made for itself, nor the virus was made for itself. They all must have an input, and they were made for a purpose, and they have to fulfill their purpose by giving the effect. That's the output or the exit. Now, if you don't know this general law, everyone can fool you, because he can bring you data and results. But how can you evaluate the results if it's a physical thing without knowing how physical works? So this general law is the most basic thing and is the most unknown, even though we all have learned it, the law of cause and effect. Nothing can exist and function from itself, neither humans nor viruses, or bacteria or anything, or even an atom. And nothing was made for itself or himself. And then we have the other laws, the secondary laws, that are depending on circumstances. So different temperature, you have different reactions. But in no case, the fundamental law can be taken away or can be changed. It governs every action in every circumstances, in everything. That's solid foundation. And so, of course, the law requires a source where everything comes from. It's just not possible without a source, because cause and effect cannot be separated. They are always distinct. The one cannot be the other, and the other cannot be the one, but they are always appearing together. Where there is a cause, there must be an effect. And where there is an effect, there must be a cause. They can never be separated, even though the one is never the other, and the other is never the one. So that's a fantastic law. It's expanding your mind. In the moment you understand it, it expanded my mind. I don't know how far, because the whole universe works by it. Now, coming closer to us as humans and as nature, I put this picture because I found this engine and the plants behind it. So how do things in general, most general, function? Doesn't matter if it's an engine or if it's a plant. It needs at least two elements that are distinct from each other. So it needs an element that generates, enables the function. And that is always an electrical current that must build up an electrical circuit. Electricity, if it is not building a circuit, it's unfunctional. It must enter or build a circuit, and in that moment, when that circuit is closed, it works. So a plant can germinate, a seed can germinate only if first the electrical circuit is established. And he remains established till the end of the plant. But the established circuit does not feed the plant. That what feeds the plant or what sustains the function is that thing that needs to be processed its water and the nutrients that it takes from earth or from air. The same thing is with an engine. There's no engine that you don't need first an electrical circuit and then a fuel by which it works. Never. It can be different. That's as fundamental it can be. So in order that something should function, you need two elements. You need the function itself, and I explain this with our stomach. So the stomach must function before you can put food into it. But the food doesn't make the function. The food is just use in order that things can happen. So food doesn't make the function. Food is used in order to function. So I function first, and then I give the fuel. The same thing I took here a child. Human body needs two types of basic needs. It needs electrical current, which generates the function, and it needs chemistry, which sustains the function. That is oxygen, water, food, sunlight, heat, and so on. The chemistry issue we all have learned. Medicine is full of food, and you have heard also in this period of this disease that goes around the news about around the world, and you find a lot of things that you can do on the physical level to avoid the disease. But all these things cannot avoid disease. Now some people come and say, well, the virus is susceptible for heat. So if you blow some heat with an hairdryer in your nose and they are in your sinuses, you kill them. Fantastic. Have you tried it? What would it matter? We have antibiotics against bacteria. And we put it in, and after we stop them, the bacteria are back, and the pus flows again. So, what do? Oh yes, eat that, do this. All these are good things. But they have nothing to do with the cause of an infectious disease. It's the electrical current that brings in the dysfunction. That's why we need to know who governs the being. Is it the fuel? Do you turn your motor on with the fuel or with the electricity? So it's the electrical current that is decisive. Yes, you need good food, you need water, you need sunlight, and the virus might be susceptible, and everything is susceptible to heat. But what if you don't change the electrical current that makes the infection and you just kill the virus for a moment? Tomorrow he's back because you can never kill it. You never can kill a virus. You never can kill a bacteria. They are never killable because if we could kill them, we would destroy the whole circuit of our ecological system. We cannot do that. Thank God. And we don't need to. That's why the question is the electrical current. Where does the electrical system come from? If he is decisive for the dysfunction, then you know where is the switch, because you know even if you have electrical current, if it's not a circuit, it doesn't happen nothing. So how is the switch turned on? Or by what is the switch turned on? So as we have a baby here, I choose to have a baby as a picture for a human being, is everyone knows that the baby is not enough to have food and electricity. We have no idea about that, most of us, and most of people don't know. But we all know that a baby needs love. And of course, then you need to ask yourself, where is the love tank? Has love something to do with the electrical current? Is it maybe the one that turns the switch on and off? Let's look. In my seminars that I have on the same channel where this presentation is, I explain it step by step. Here I just go over it because it's impossible to explain everything. So I take the human structure. We must know who determines function. And we know the whole body is together in the cortex. And we have two of them. And above the cortex, we have our spirit, our mind. This is, I show all the evidences that it's there because together they make the soul or life. So it's like the body is the piano, the cortex are the keys, and the spirit is the player, and the soul is the music. So two different elements gives a new element. So everything that happens in our life, every of your diseases must start in your soul. That is, they must start from the beginning somewhere. You must know where is the beginning of the human soul. Where? How does things work? But ignorance of how you work will just make you vulnerable to any kind of information that you cannot handle. So, in my presentation, I show this, but we must go. So our decisions are output from our spirit. They are made electrical currents. We will see how it works, like 1 and 0. And they are the entrance, the input in your body. So the output of your mind, of your spirit, is the input of your body. So everything you do with your body is your decision. And I don't think I need to prove that to you. You can see it. If you don't decide anything, you do nothing. But even that might be a decision. But you don't do anything when you say no. And when you say yes, you do. But now, if the spirit has an output that comes as input into the body as an electrical current and governs the whole being, then it must have a door. The spirit is as empty as the stomach. You must fill it up with something. And there are also two elements that the spirit needs, which are different. He needs spiritual information, words, images. But he cannot take these images or words in except he sees them as truth. And for this, he must exercise faith. You see, faith evaluates things according to what it takes as a measurement for if it is truth or not. And the mind works so that whatever you once said is truth, you will not again. When it comes to you, the information, you let it in or you take it in because it's already checked by your spirit. You take information in, only the door can only open through the door handle faith when you believe it is truth. How many of you have believed the newspapers? I haven't watched so many news since, I don't know, because I get them on my phone. I didn't watch news for more than 16 years. I stopped watching them because I knew they don't say anything that I need. So, you must believe what another person says. But you only take it in when you believe it is truth. So by what do you evaluate what comes at the door of your identity, of the door of your spirit? Because every information must come in somewhere. And it cannot come into your brain because your brain has no idea what information is. It's exactly like a computer. He has no idea what it is. And then the human spirit needs an attachment. He cannot exist without being attached to a love source. So like this needs a power source. You also, your spirit needs a power source. And that is by trust. We have attachments to humans, to other spirits, and we need the information. So the one you get by trust and the other by faith. Both are involuntary things. You must exercise them. It depends just on what you base it. So, let's look to the situation right now and see how our subconscious functions. We have in the subconscious the connection between the spirit and the body. And that what is green is the body and the red is the spirit. And he must put all things that come to him into two criteria, loss and gain. And he has two responses to it. To the gain he has yes, and to the loss he has no. He must by all means avoid loss. This is set by the way who created the spirit. No one can change it, because everything must work in a circle. You can just go in one direction. You can never go in two directions in a circle. Imagine in this iPad, we would have suddenly another direction in a circuit. How much would it still function? It could not function. So everything must function in a circuit, and in a circuit you have only one direction. So the same is our spirit. He can go only in one direction. He can go to expansion, but never go back. He must avoid loss. And he must avoid personal loss. And I explained this very clear on my presentation, so look to them. But now just coming to the knowing how things work, we must say no to loss and yes to gain. Now we have an enemy, which is invisible, unlocatable, unkillable, deadly. How much can you avoid it? That information that is out there is more killing than any other weapon that can you ever put into action. You see, an atomic bomb may kill a certain place and a certain amount of people. But an information that brings you into a situation where you cannot avoid the personal loss will destroy you from inside out by no chance. That's why in this world we don't have a battle of weapons. And who is stronger in weapons? Because that is worthless when it comes about knowledge. So if you must avoid loss, personal loss, but something comes upon you by which you cannot avoid it, you must react unreasonable. And anxiety and fear is totally unreasonable. And what brings the world today into a crisis is anxiety and fear. We create a crisis before she is just appeared. That's a fantastic way of, I say so, of war leading. You have an example on some place. The same threat you think comes to you. You have an example of a threat on another place, and you think it might keep you as well. It's invisible, it's unlocatable. Oh yes, it's locatable, it's in your neighbor. So take distance, 1 or 2 meters. So you are just driven by the most irrational thing that exists. And you become anxious, fearful. Fearful from, you see, my wife goes just everywhere and she's never at home to, she does her business, her jobs, her buying, and wherever she goes to the doctors with her mom. I suddenly found myself, maybe she's infected. Well, doesn't matter. Will I still kiss her? Yes. It's an amazing thing when you don't know what happens with you. You go in some shops, you go, I work in my practice. People say, see, well, I respect you. I respect the lawgivers. But what's in my mind must be free. Depression, despair, anger, and rage. The violence is growing up. Don't think if you give a human being to his mind a threat that he cannot avoid, he will get crazy sooner or later. Jealousy and violence. He cannot avoid it. As long as he believes, he cannot avoid the personal loss. If he would know how things work, if he would know how things are, he would just be in full control of himself. And no one can fool him, like you cannot fool a specialist in computers, telling him that he can fly. So what is the reason? What is the determining element in the human mind? There are two standards. It is the truth about yourself. You either can see yourself a creature or a creator. Now, if that standard in you is a lie, that you believe you're a superior being, you must trust whatever someone tells you, and you must run and avoid personal loss because it's about you. If you know that you're a creature, you know that everything in nature is under God's control, and you know that no one can produce you at no time personal loss. So you can avoid it by your own decision. But if you don't have the truth in you, it will destroy you. Even this is explained very well in my presentation. So let's come together and see the circuit and then come to the subject itself, because I haven't spoken yet about the virus and time flies away. So we have a spirit which comes before the body, and it starts in its consciousness, will, mind, conscience. And identity is that which governs or decides about your love source, about whom you trust and what you believe. Identity decides. And that you take into trust or to faith, that's taking, that gives your motivation, and then it leads to your decision. And we have seen it's yes and no, and if you cannot avoid, you get into trouble. So that decision makes an electrical impulse and governs the whole being. And if that electrical impulse is given into the cortex, from the cortex it must be go on according to the law. It takes to give to the limbic system, and the limbic system gives back immediately through emotion a reaction, a chemical reaction to the cortex, where you feel if you think correctly according to the body or not. You see, fear is not an emotion. Fear is an idea of not avoiding a personal loss that leads to a terrible emotion. I'm a fearful person. I took out my appendix because he hurt, even though it was not infected. After not even 12 hours after I had my lecture while I was in medical school about the danger of getting an appendicitis and how dangerous it is, you can die. And so I went home, and in my hypochondriac nature, I was at midnight in the ER having symptoms of appendicitis. So I know what fear is. I know what a panic attack is. It's the result of a belief of a lie. And the emotions, if you would check them, they would help you to see that you're wrong. But the electrical current doesn't stop in the limbic system. It is passed on to the bone marrow and to the whole system that we call immune system. So here, every one of your decisions come in not as a spiritual thing, but as a physical one. It's an electrical current. It's that what is given out from the nerve and from the centers of the limbic system that react to that input, and it goes to the bone marrow. There is your blood and all these things. That's the immune system heart. And then you put into this system the air, the water, the food, and then it comes back to your mind and your identity. Now, if you have the right identity, you know who you are, God is your love source, everything in your body works normally. You introduce the right things, that is the fuel, and you don't disturb the electrical current, but you lead them correctly. Now, if your identity is wrong, your love source is man and animal, then your bone marrow in a negative thing, when it's positive, nothing happens. But when you are confronted with a threat that you cannot avoid, it brings symptoms out that show up in your body that something is wrong. So each disease comes from here, and then it goes into all organs. Where it shows up and how it shows up, I don't even care. Because the input is one. That's why if you call it psoriasis or lung COPD or whatever it is, or arthritis or cancer, hypertension, it's all a wrong electrical input that disturbs the chemical reactions and leads to the symptoms. And so they all start from your input. That's why everything does not work normally in a negative thing. So, in a physical element, all processes are controlled. In our body, there are no coincidences. You see, in a physical thing, would you ever think that there is a battle in this iPad between information A and information B? Would it, or is it? It never is. Because this works exactly without coincidences. And so is our body, because it's a pure physical thing. And in a pure physical thing, you have no chances. You have no battles. Battles are just in the minds. Battles can only to animal battle because they have a mind, a spirit. But you cannot put an iPad in an iPad or an information in information that battles each other. That's why your body is conducted by what your spirit puts in it. And nothing happens by coincidence. Disease is never a product or a random product. It cannot be, it will never be. It must have a definite cause. And that's why we believe in chance in medicine, and we think, oh, it's by chance that it comes here or comes there or pops up as this, as that. No, friends. In a body, there is no fight. There's only commands and reactions to commands. Nothing else. So, let's look to the situation of a virus, bacteria, fungi, or fruits. Since viruses are not living beings, they are just proteins. I did not want to take a picture that you will see all over today's. I took something tangible to your mind to understand. Because a virus is as tiny as it can be. But a knife you can see. And I call viruses a knife. Yes, some are bigger, some are smaller, some have a more cutting edge than the other, but they are nice. Have you ever seen a knife cut by itself? Have you ever seen a knife that uses itself to cut? I never saw. Then we have bacteria and fungi. And these are living beings. These are beings that are opportunistic. That means they live on us, but they cannot live by themselves. They need power. They might have their own electrical current, but they have no fuel. So they can only grow when there is fuel. And they grow because we don't see them, and we need them. They, in our intestine, they are in a very steady state. Fungus grow, bacteria eats them, and it's a very good system where we're working in. Those are opportunistic. When the body gives them food, suddenly they rise. And if they're pathogens, that means they make a toxin that is against our cells, then we call them pathogens. But we have a lot of bacteria everywhere, and some of them never make a disease, but just a smell. You see, as an ENT, I get many patients that come with me and say, I have a bad mouth smell. And I said, I know why. There's a growth of bacteria. But that bacteria you don't see, but you smell it, because they produce such a strong smell in such a little amount of thing that you see it. You smell it, but you don't see nothing in the mouth. And then some people take out their tonsils and they still don't get rid of the bad smell, because there are a growth of bacteria. They make this smell. They don't make you fever, they don't make you anything, but they smell badly. Now, how could they grow? They only can grow because your body gives them food. He gives them some place where they can grow. And then, of course, we have fruits and nuts. And my question is, how many of them? I mean, all of these 5 things can make you sick. And I hope you see there is nothing wrong in a nut, is it? Or in a pollen thing. Or in a strawberry, because some people are allergic to strawberries. They eat it, fall into an anaphylactic shock, or their throat swallows suddenly and they die on it. There's nothing pathogen. How does it work? So it's never the microorganisms that can harm us. They only do it in a secondary step. Let's see a few things that are in nature, unchangeable, always the same. A macroorganism always governs the microorganism. You see, there are more microorganisms than macroorganisms. And as long as the macroorganism, I take a plum or a cherry, has its shield, the microorganisms can do nothing. But in the moment it comes the time where it's overripe, where that what makes them susceptible to the microorganism happens. And then the microorganism takes over, because the macroorganism made it possible. If microorganisms would rule the world, would rule nature, macroorganisms never would exist. Higher organisms always govern the lower. It's never a lower organism that governs the higher. Otherwise, there were no higher organisms. All settlements with germs of the human skin and the mucous membrane are a symbiosis. That is, we need them. That's why I wash my hands. But I don't use much sanitizers, because I don't want to kill those bacteria that help my skin to be safe. Yes, when I did surgeries, you do all those procedures because it's an extreme situation. But we need the bacteria in our skin. When we take antibiotics, we destroy some of the needed bacteria in our intestinal system, in our colon. And then we get difficulties. Why? Because we need them. And then they grow the fungi and all other things, because we bring the whole ecological system out of its order. And then we have to do something to bring it back again. So we are living with the germs in a symbiosis. And they are not dangerous as long as we don't use them to cut or whatever it happens. In order that a germ can grow on you, and those are for bacteria and fungi, an inflammation in the body always precedes the growth of the germ. It might be a little bit different with the viruses, but not really. We'll see later how the virus works. But if the body doesn't make place and a space for the germs, they can never do anyone anything. There must be a space for them to grow. And they can grow in the left sinus or in the right sinus, on the left tonsils, or on the right tonsils, or on both. They can grow one place in the lung and in the other not. By chance? Of course not. It is always the body that must prepare the nourishment. Where and what? So, in order that we have a pathogenic virus, I call it now, if it's a virus or pathogen, it doesn't matter, in the body, we need at least 4 simultaneous occurring events at the same time. They're required. So simultaneous occurring events. First is the body must activate the virus. That is, it must absorb, integrate it into the body's electrical system. A virus is an electrical entity. Everything is electrical. But if it's not taken in, nothing can happen. So, in order to come in, your electrical system, your body, must introduce it according to the law, because it cannot penetrate the body. It's so tiny. It must be taken, it must be introduced, and only the macroorganism can integrate it into the body's electrical system. That's the first thing that needs to happen. The second is, there must be a cell that must multiply the virus. A virus, according to the law. Have you ever seen iPads multiplying themselves? Now, a virus is an iPad. I mean, not even an iPad, but he is not a living being. He does not replicate himself. He cannot do that. That's why it must be replicated by a macroorganism. There must be a certain cell that can do that. Not all cells can replicate certain viruses. That's the second thing that must happen. The third thing, the body cells that multiply it must have the multiplication program for it to happen. So those cells that doesn't have the program, they cannot multiply. And the fourth thing, most important, is the multiplication program gene must be activated first. Who controls the whole process? Or it is random? You see, I have seen many virus infections. I experienced myself a lot of blisters on my, and we know that's a varicella zoster that comes out, or varicella simplex, and then you have shingles, and then you have the papilloma viruses, and all kinds of things. Interesting is, I never get it except when I have a mental problem, a stress point. It can be sometimes just a second, and after 2 days, it appears under my skin or in my skin. Now, it takes 2 days. In certain bodies, it might take in others faster, I don't know. But it takes an amount of time. They say the nerves are, these viruses, once they are in your body, they are dormant in your nervous ganglions, in your spine. And then they come out. But who leads them out? There must be an electrical thing. But they must be they must be governed to come to the cell which is susceptible to them on the membrane to take them in. They must have the gene that can multiply it, and they must have that gene made on in order to multiply it. And why is it just coming in a few places and doesn't take over all? Because it's not a random process. It's a controlled process. Who controls it all? I hope you see that he who makes the input, the electrical input in your body, is controlling the whole process. That's why the mind is so important. What it takes in, it must decide to. And whom it trusts, it must do it. So if you have the truth at your entrance, you will trust God and you would believe and your faith would be real because it would not be placed on statistics, on experiments, but on an immutable law, how you function and how everything in this nature functions. Then your faith is real, and then you can let out of your life those things that cannot be because the law doesn't permit them to be. But if you believe that you're a God, you think you can estimate things without looking to law. How many have you heard in these days the term law? I mean, they were given laws, to change in laws in a split of a second. They take away all the rights of men because now the danger is so great. Yes, there is laws, but natural laws. Who teaches you to say, look, nature functions like this? What the newspaper tell you, or the conclusions to what they come, cannot be. But since you think you're a God, you think you know. And this is why we can predict the impossible or the invisible just because of a sample somewhere in the world that happened, or in two places. And then we have the computers, and you must believe them. But your faith is blind because it is not built on something that you can rule out if it exists or not. So my question is, how could the current situation come into existence? If things are like that, like I exposed them, how could it be that the whole world is in fear? I hope not the whole world, because there are also people, and I'm happy to be here in Germany because Germans, scientists and all others have a balanced approach to things. They don't go so scary on things immediately, at least some of them. And so they bring out their opinion. And they have, of course, certain data from somewhere, but they don't go so far as most countries go. But why do we have the situation that we have today? There is an unchangeable law in nature that says what you sow, that you reap. And what we see today is something that was sown for a long time. Actually, it's the cause why we have what we have today is the belief in a theory of evolution. This belief in this theory, not the theory itself, but the belief in the theory of evolution has created the current situation. And how deep this belief is shown how many believe in evolution. Because you see, the theory of evolution that started first with Darwin, 1844, and was developed more and more and was exposed, and you learn it in every school, introduced an element in nature that does not exist, and that is chance, coincidence. By doing that, it disentangled, it takes away the nature's basic law of cause and effect. And now you have an effect without a cause. We are the result of chance. That's why you're here. Now, you don't need much reason to see how unreasonable that is, I hope. Because there is nothing in nature. You think my fingers work by coincidence? Is there anything in your system that is coincidental? I could speak hours about this theory that has no foundation in nature at all. Yes, it was made out of observations, but you put to your observation a non-lawful thing, your own opinion because you believe you're a superior being, so you must have created yourself. That's the theory of evolution. But if you then are, of course, by chance here, you also die by chance. Your diseases are by chance. Then everything is by chance. You see how far that reaches. Now we come to the discovery of the germs. In time, about 100 years ago, they discovered the germs. And it was built into the theory because if you have a foundation, you must, everything that you see and experience, you must build in. And so suddenly the germs, the microorganisms, are declared to be the cause of a disease. And so they become our enemies. The discovery of the germs was built in the theory, and an effect was declared a cause. When you don't have a law, you declare a fact a cause. Every germ is secondary, never primary. And it goes on. If that is the basis where you believe, then circumstances, coincidence, contamination, infection determine the human being. Man has no control over himself. Thus he sees himself as a victim of circumstances. And we come out with history in the past. And we say, look, there was the Spanish flu or there was the pestilence. Friends, is there anything that destroys this earth that is not human generated? I don't know of anything that destroys this earth except the human. Because to them was given the administration of this earth by God. And every pestilence is the result of the human actions, not of the environment. The environment might come back to you, but you are the initiator of it. So if disease is by coincidence, if I can get an infection just because someone coughed to me, I'm a prisoner of circumstances. Then I must hide. I have worked in ENT for 21 years, in my hospital and in my practice together, taking both years together. And I never got anything. I only get sick when I change my electrical system through what I think. But every day I get coughed. Every day people spit on me. Because I have no how to avoid it. Of course, I can put an astronaut thing on me, but it's unnecessary. Because I know I cannot get sick by accident. Even if you turn around me 1,000 of viruses. Because if my body doesn't take them in, if my electrical current is right, and if the body's cells have that program, and if they don't have the program, you see my wife, me being always with this blisters on my lips, cold blisters they call it, and they're very contagious, these viruses. But I kissed my wife always with them. And in 37 years of marriage, she never got one of it. And I think I could pull it out of it because she has not the program. So if you don't have the program, if you don't have the gene, if the gene is not turned on, if your current situation, I mean the electrical currents to your body flow correctly, nothing can happen. That's why the fear of microorganism is never justified. It never was. Jesus had no fear to touch the leper. It never can be. It's always us that uses the knife. And yes, some knives are cutting stronger and others are not cutting so strong. But what is cancer? It's a knife. What is hypertension? It's a knife. It's an effect that comes from somewhere. So disease if it is by another one generated in my life, then we must do what we do today. We must put into quarantine those who are healthy, because they might be a danger for others. I find this is the most worst result of thinking of how contamination alone can make you sick. It's never possible. You can have ticks, you can have mosquitoes. They alone can never make you any disease. Because there must be a relationship. And the law of nature shows how that relationship works. A macroorganism governs always the microorganisms. Now, the theory of evolution denied, the existence of a spirit of man in animals. Because if all is physical, then there is nothing spiritual. That's why we speak about emotional thing and not about spiritual things in man. Love is a spiritual thing. It never is an emotion. It creates an emotion, but it is purely a thought. It's purely spiritual. So, by the theory of evolution, because things can do something to themselves, you eliminate the spirit that guides the whole motion of the machinery. And then the physical elements can suddenly think. Your brain can think. The frontal lobe has morals. Fantastic. So this iPad has morals as well. Not only it can have its own plasticity. It changes itself. Is that evolution? That something physical can move or can change itself? The law of nature says that everything that is moved that moves must be moved. This iPad will never move by itself. It's only a spirit that can move it, or a machine, something. But suddenly the brain can not only make its own impulse, it can only control himself. And out of this all, also the virus can mutate. Since when have you seen a knife mutate to another knife? You see, you only can mutate yourself, the virus. And yes, viruses are changed, but they are knives. Who changes them? The human body changes them. Who changes them according to the input of his spirit. Yes, we have mutations, but the mutations are always made. They never occur by themselves. But you see, if you say the survival fittest, then the virus mutates itself to survive, but he has not even life. How should he survive then? Have you ever seen an iPad or a knife to mutate in order to survive? That's why it's so important to know a virus is not a living being. A virus is a biological protein that has no life in it, that has only electricity. And it cannot replicate, it can do nothing by itself because the law doesn't permit it. So all these things have come into our minds over hundreds of years. 180 years started, and now over centuries, over tens of years. And now, what you have sown, you must reap. Because what you believe determines all your actions. You have no choice. Illness, because of the theory of evolution, is therefore not a natural program and a help for man to see his spiritual malfunctioning, but a plague from which he is attacked without his intervention and responsibility. So you're a victim. Now, if you're a victim of a chance, you can do nothing to be healed. You remain in disease. So I encourage you to see the other presentations that I have so that you can have the whole aspect, how things work, to see how things really are. I will finish because I started with these questions of what do you believe is true? Jesus says in John 8:30-32 that many believed in him, and then he said to those Jews that believed in him, he said, if you continue in my word, that if you believe it, if you do it, because you cannot believe anything and not do it. You see, this is a great thing to understand. Because today, Christians, they might think they believe Christ, but actually they deny him. Because they believe a lie that the enemy of humanity has put into us. And they believe they're Christians. But they react on a word that is false and experience anxiety and fear. If you continue my word, then are you my disciple indeed. And you shall know the truth, and the truth will set you free. You see, if you know who you are, if you know that you are a created being, you will check everything according to the law, and you will trust only your Creator. So let me put the question that I put at the beginning. What do you believe is the truth? This is the most decisive question of everyone in his life. Because life starts with the opening of the door of the Spirit, and it is faith that opens the door. No one is able to not exercise faith because he needs information. He must, as our stomach needs to digest the food, and our body needs the food, so the mind, the spirit needs information. But the only way to get it in is faith. It's the same thing like swallowing. Physically, for your stomach, it's swallowing. Spiritually, for your spirit, it is faith. It's the door handle of your spirit. You must use it because you cannot live without information. You cannot live without information. But if you take in the information as truth, which is a lie, it will destroy you. No atom weapon is so efficient than deception. No atom weapon can be ever so efficient like self-deception. The world dies today in millions and billions because of self-deception. It's not only the infectious diseases that can bring to kill. There are thousands of other diseases. But they suddenly are not existent anymore in such days like this. So the question at the end, what do you believe? And in whom do you believe? You have no choice to not exercise faith. You have no choice to not trust. Would you rather trust something you can never control? Or would you rather trust something you can control with your own mind? Looking to things how they work and looking to a law that is unchangeable as God is unchangeable. So what and in whom do you believe? It is your destiny. There is no other way. What you believe, you must do. And you cannot avoid to believe because you need to eat. So you can eat then spiritually the wrong thing, which implementing will take your spirit in prison, you will take yourself in prison, and you will destroy your body. Because everything and anything in our life depends on one single thing. It starts with this one thing. What do you believe as truth? Now, this is now your choice. I hope you will reason with me and you will take the choice to put your faith on something unchangeable, not on human minds, not on human ideas, not on humans' expertises, but on that which is absolute, that shows you what is possible or not. Because your destiny, and it's not only your earthly destiny, your eternal destiny is based on this very one question. What do you believe is truth? I hope you take your choice today.